Hello and welcome to 25 Concepts in Anthropology. Today the concept we're going to look at is moral economy. Now, when anthropologists use the word economy, we don't necessarily mean the things that you'll study in an economics faculty at university. Rather, what we refer to is things like giving and taking, who does the dishes tonight at home, who does the shopping, this kind of stuff is really important for us. Again, gift giving at Christmas, these are the kind of things that we're interested in as anthropologists. So when we're going to talk about economy today, it's important that you put aside the idea of economy as being about things like GDP and salaries and so on. That's not particularly or centrally what anthropologists are concerned with. Okay, what we're going to look at today is moral economy. A brief definition of moral economy is your understanding of what is reasonable or unreasonable economic behaviour of people around you. In other words, how you expect people to act. Now you'll know if you listen to my lecture on reciprocity that if I give you a gift for Christmas, I can naturally expect a gift from you next year for Christmas. If I don't get a gift, I feel like, according to my moral economy, you have committed a misdeed, if you like. You've infringed my moral economy by not giving me a gift. Another idea of moral economy you might have is, okay, you expect from your boss, you expect her to pay you every week, but you might also expect her to give you a Christmas bonus or even put on a Christmas party, or let you take leave if somebody in your family is sick. So this is the idea of moral economy. Basically, what you can expect from people in your economy, in your economic sphere, if you like, in your economic sphere. And again, this understanding of economic is a larger understanding of economic. It also includes things like gift giving, doing tasks around the home. All right, I'll just zoom that in a bit better, so hopefully you get a better look at that one. Excuse me, you have to see my face in all its glory. There we go. All right, moving up and down. Now, excuse me. So that's a simple definition of moral economy. The idea was first postulated by a historian, actually, by the name of E.P. Thompson. He's a famous Marxist historian of the 1960s and 70s. And he was sick of other Marxists. Just saying, well, people riot when their bellies are empty. People riot when their bellies are empty. E.P. Thompson said, no, it's not that simple. People might not riot if they're hungry, if they think the cause of their hunger is something natural, like there was a flood that couldn't be controlled. Then people will riot. So, to give you a better example, if you're if the hunger, just say you and I are peasants, a landlord comes and takes our grain and leaves us nothing left to eat, then we'll get angry. A landlord comes and takes 10 kilos of grain off you and me, we'll get angry because that makes us hungry. But imagine we've had a really good harvest and the employer takes 10 kilos and it still leaves us with 90 kilos. Then we won't go out and riot and be as angry. So the point here is that it's really not so much being hungry, but the way people in the economy act that causes rioting. And the way people in the economy act is moral economy. In other words, a peasant's moral economy causes rioting. This thing's going up all over the place. Will that make it any better? Still seem to be going all over the place. I don't really know why. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so he's looking at economic practices in the 1700s. One of them is, if you like, scalping. You probably know the idea of scalping. There's a football game on, it's a big game, somebody goes and buys 50 tickets. not just for themselves, but to sell later at a higher price. That's called scalping. Scalping is not a new thing. It happened in the 1700s in relation to grains and other produce. Middlemen would go to the farmers and buy the food off the farmers before it went to market. Then those middlemen would take it to market and sell it at higher or lower prices. Higher, of course. Sell it at higher prices to make a bigger profit. Okay. This infringed on the moral economy of the peasants. The peasants weren't happy that these middlemen were doing this. It was making the cost of living too expensive for them. So they rioted. They rioted against the middlemen who scalped, if you like, scalped the grain. Another reason why they rioted seems very unlikely in a modern context, but they rioted because of the bread mix. Basically, bakers weren't putting enough white wheat in the bread. They were adding too much barley, oats and rye. Now, we all love rye bread, right? We love it, but we don't really love it because actually most people prefer white bread. Certainly in the 1700s, they preferred white bread. And they weren't happy when farmers mixed it the wrong way. Now, this is a big deal because bread was the largest part of the diet back in the 1700s for peasants for farmers in England. So, this bread mix was an infraction against their morality. It didn't accord with their moral economy. Or, according to their moral economy, the claim was unacceptable. So we could say, what is unacceptable? It was unreasonable. What is unacceptable or unreasonable? Okay. In economic actions, in economic behaviour, let's say. In economic behaviour. Australian spelling. For Americans, we'll take this off. Economic behaviour. In other words, middlemen buying grain and selling it at a higher price, bakers mixing too much oats and barley into their bread was unacceptable. So that's the idea. And Thompson says because of this, we shouldn't actually use the term riot all that much. Riot is too simplistic. It doesn't explain what's really going on. If we really want to understand what's going on, we've got to see these as actions against people who infringe the moral economy. People who act in economic ways that are unreasonable from the peasant's perspective. Okay, that's Thompson. Now, we're going to look at another guy, an anthropologist called Scott. Scott got very excited by what Thompson wrote and decided to apply this to Malaysian peasants in the 1970s. He did field work amongst Malaysian peasants. They were undergoing what was called the Green Revolution. Basically, the Green Revolution meant they were no longer using water buffaloes to plough, they were using machines, tractors. They were no longer using dung or manure for fertilizer. They were using packets you bought from the shop full of nitrate, etc. They were no longer harvesting by hand. They were harvesting with combine harvesters. As a result, the poor people who owned very little land were losing out and were increasingly being sidelined. Now, these people, according to Scott, are always up to their necks in water. They're always on the verge of drowning. Peasants are always on the verge of drowning. If a landlord makes too much claims of tax, they go under, they die. It's that simple. They can die if there's too much, if they have a bad harvest, they can die. If there's too many claims on tax, they'll die of starvation. In other words, they're always up to their necks in water. And being up to your necks in water, being perpetually on the verge of starvation, or often on the verge of starvation, let's say, makes a moral economy based on threats to subsistence. Anything that threatens their ability to exist, anything that threatens their subsistence is deemed as an infringement of moral economy. So it's the same kind of point. If you and I are Malaysian peasants and we've got 100 kilos of rice and the landlord comes and takes 10 kilos of them, we'll be okay. You know, you can have that. I'm not too worked up. If you and I have only got 10 kilos of rice and the landlord comes and takes those 10 kilos, then we're going to be very, very angry because it infringes our idea of what is morally right in an economic context. What is morally right in an economic context. All right, so that's Scott's example. Now I'm going to apply this idea of moral economy to the GFC, the global financial crisis. Most of you have lived through this. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you have lived through it. 2008, there's a huge tumble in stock in share prices, etc., etc., etc. Now, what made people so angry? Why were there so many demonstrations? Why were there so many documentaries about the GFC, this GFC, that, getting all worked up about it? Well, from the moral economy perspective, if we use moral economy to analyse the GFC, what was happening was people were acting in ways that infringed our economic notion of what is right and wrong. In other words, we were angry at the banks when they made too much money, the super profits. We were also angry at the banks when they made huge losses, because we don't want banks, in our moral economy at least, we don't want banks to be too profitable or too unprofitable, but we really want banks to serve the community. To serve the community as opposed to serving the market, if you like. We want banks to serve the community and not particularly serve the market. People who feel like that felt like what the GFC was a result of people who infringed their moral economy. So my moral economy, your moral economy might have been banks shouldn't be too profitable or unprofitable. They should just hover around at the right level, because if they're making profits, it's off me. And if they're making losses, it's because they're badly managed. Also singled out for attention in the moral economy of this period was the CEOs. The idea was that the chief executive officers of these companies were making too much profit. Their corporate greed, their rapacity caused the GFC. So that's an idea of moral economy applied to contemporary circumstances. Okay, the idea is not perfect. None of the concepts we look at explain everything. All the concepts we look at illuminate some things and obscure other things. If they illuminate enough things, we'll be happy with them. If they illuminate more than they obscure, we'll say, okay, they're useful, we'll put them in our anthropological toolkit. So what are the problems with moral economy? I haven't thought too much about this, but one thing is that materialist economists, people who are really concerned with who owns what, not too concerned with more ideas of morality, but who owns what, how much money people possess and so on. These materialist economists might say, well, even this moral economy, it kind of we can explain it in terms of material economics. In other words, if I have this expectation of the boss, there's a kind of dollar figure on how much I expect. I expect for my Christmas party there'll be champagne and oysters, etc. You can kind of figure this in terms of money, and the boss could theoretically compensate me by just giving me the money instead of the Christmas party. Or I might go to another boss if I don't think the Christmas party's enough. In other words, a materialist explanation, or a materialist social scientist might say, okay, I can explain these phenomena without having to resort to moral economy. The other problem is the way it's used can be a bit romantic. People who use it see it as kind of like a rightful tool that people use against the exploitations of the market system, which is okay, but there is a dark side to moral economy, which I see in my own fieldwork location and other fieldwork locations, which is that sometimes people who, well, we can accuse somebody of being a sorcerer or a witch if we feel like they're making too many demands. They take too much water, or if they're too wealthy. This isn't so much in my fieldwork location, to be honest, but other fieldwork locations people write about. Somebody who's very wealthy, for example, will be accused of being a witch or a sorcerer and might be pulled apart and burnt. Literally pulled apart and burnt. And that's because of moral economy. What this means, not so much, the concept is good according to this criticism. The concept of moral economy is good. It's just that we shouldn't romanticize it and put a positive value on it. We should think of it as neither positive nor negative according to this criticism, but just as a useful tool for understanding things. Okay, I'm sure there are more criticisms of the idea, but just to reiterate the basic point, moral economy is basically our morality of how people should act economically within our sphere. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you for more 25 concepts in anthropology.